Why are more selective colleges than ever before relying on QuestBridge? That is the topic of today's video. My name is Craig Meister. I'm a college admissions coach. You can learn more about me and how you can work with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process on my website, which is collegemeister.com. And if you're interested in learning about whether or not you are or your student is on track for selective college admission in the United States of America, visit areyouontracktogetin.com. Again, that's areyouontracktogetin.com, at which you will complete a free 3-minute assessment. Your results will be emailed to you right away, and they will help you clarify whether or not you are or your student is on track for selective college admission in the United States of America. The headline in Inside Higher Ed reads as follows: Selective colleges double down on QuestBridge, the program which places promising low-income students at selective colleges is seeing record early admit rates and new university partnerships. What's behind the surge in interest? By Liam Knox. As colleges and universities look for new ways to diversify their student bodies and increase access to low-income students, one national program is emerging as an increasingly popular tool in those efforts. QuestBridge, a national match program that places high-achieving low-income students at selective partner colleges, saw early admission rates for its applicants rise by 17% this year, according to data released in December. A total of 2,627 students from QuestBridge's program were accepted early to the class of 2029, and that number will likely grow as regular decision acceptance letters roll in, and that growth will likely continue into the future after the 21-year-old organization recently added 3 new university partners to its roster: Bates College, the University of Richmond, and most notably, Harvard University, the last Ivy League institution to join forces with the organization. QuestBridge students go through a competitive application process to become finalists. Only 7,288 were selected this cycle out of more than 25,000 applicants. The finalists rank their top choices out of the organization's 55 partner colleges, and QuestBridge matches them with a full scholarship at the highest ranking institution on their list that accepts them. Now, I'm going to take a step back for a moment. What I've read to you is basically painting a very clear picture of why the colleges are so attracted to QuestBridge. The colleges get to outsource a huge part of the process to a third-party nonprofit that basically reviews the application for the college before the college even looks at the student's application. The QuestBridge team is looking at the student's application, and they, at QuestBridge, select the finalists for consideration by the colleges that are members of QuestBridge. Who are these deciders? Who are they accountable to? Or what are they accountable for? What are their criteria used to make their decisions on the fate of all of these applicants? Look at this. This is 25,000 applicants, and only 7,288 were selected this cycle out of more than 25,000. What is the criteria being used? It's all very, very shady. And of course, this is all happening in the context of a post-affirmative action world when Harvard now, even Harvard, feels the need to join QuestBridge. You know that something is up. Harvard has no problem subsidizing the education of many, many students who go there. They are getting many, many applications. Why would Harvard need a third-party intermediary? A spokesperson for QuestBridge chalked up this cycle's record-breaking early acceptances to typical growth. But the numbers are hard to ignore. QuestBridge went from having 1,755 early admits in 2023 to 2,627 in this current cycle, during which time it only added 2 partner universities. Institutions say that QuestBridge helps deliver talented students from diverse backgrounds, filling in where their resources fall short. That's become especially important since the Supreme Court's decision in June 2023 banning affirmative action. In fact, universities' interest in QuestBridge scholars surged last year too, right after the ruling, when admit rates went up a whopping 28%, and the program added Cornell and Skidmore as partners. The vast majority of QuestBridge partner schools practice affirmative action before the court decision. After a slew of selective colleges reported declines in Black and Hispanic enrollment this fall, they have been looking for race-neutral recruitment and admissions tools to enhance incoming classes' diversity, including expanded financial aid programs and a commitment to first-generation students. Brian Cook, Director of Higher Education Policy at the Urban Institute and the author of an ongoing study on the wide-reaching effects of the Supreme Court decision, said that whether colleges were looking to boost racial diversity or expand on efforts to admit more low-income students post-affirmative action, QuestBridge fits the bill. Quote, "My sense from talking to admissions professionals across the country is that they're utilizing every tool available to them to identify diverse students," end quote, Cook said. Quote, "Before the Supreme Court decision, QuestBridge was a good resource, but maybe not necessary. It's not surprising to see an uptick after the fact," end quote. Again, this is now Craig speaking. What's going on here? This is an organization that is selling itself as supporting low-income students, regardless of race. Why are colleges going to the QuestBridge well to diversify their classes? Many of the colleges in question, including Harvard, like I have indicated in previous videos, have no problem fully subsidizing the education of students who apply to and get into Harvard via the Common App. Why is QuestBridge all of a sudden in such great demand? Some of the colleges with the steepest declines in underrepresented student enrollment are doubling down on QuestBridge during this early admissions cycle. Brown University, which saw a 10% decline in Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous students, admitted 90 QuestBridge finalists early, up from 64 the prior year. Tufts University had a 6 percentage point drop in underrepresented students this fall and admitted 42 QuestBridge applicants early, up from 30 in 23-24. MIT, which reported a 9-point drop in minority students, admitted 100 QuestBridge students early, nearly double the 56 it accepted last year and comprising more than 10% of its early action cohort this cycle. Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous enrollment also fell by 10 percentage points this fall at Cornell, which is welcoming its first class of QuestBridge scholars this cycle. QuestBridge, crucially, is not a race-based program. If it were, it might earn the scrutiny being given other race-conscious scholarships and admission-adjacent initiatives. Instead, its criteria are income-based, at least officially. This past year, 90% of applicants came from families who earn less than $65,000. While the organization's website breaks down data on certain applicant characteristics, 81% first generation, 37% Southerners, 5% non-citizens, it offers no information currently on racial demographics. As recently as 2020, the organization did publish those breakdowns. That year, about 41% of finalists were white, 24% were Asian American, 14% were Latino, and 9% were Black. What was not reported, even back then, was how do those demographics compare to the students who actually apply via the QuestBridge application? And how do those numbers compare to the demographics of the students who ultimately matched? That's a huge question. We, again, don't know enough about the decision makers at QuestBridge and their criteria for getting the finalists where they get them. This is all extremely shady. It has always been extremely shady, but it is particularly shady now when all these colleges are increasingly relying on QuestBridge for applicants in a post-affirmative action world. Quote, as an organization focused on socioeconomic status, we do not currently publish race data, although there have not been significant shifts in our demographics by race pre and post the Supreme Court decision, a QuestBridge spokesperson wrote in an email. Chaz Robinson, education policy advisor at the left of center think tank Third Way, said the affirmative action ban isn't the only important context for the rise in QuestBridge admits. Heightening scrutiny of wealthy colleges has increased pressure to boost financial aid programs and increase socioeconomic diversity, both problems that QuestBridge can be part of addressing. Quote, there's growing concern from students about costs. There's growing questions for administrators about value, about the students they're serving, end quote, Robinson said. QuestBridge, quote, can be part of building the case that they're helping students from struggling backgrounds achieve socioeconomic mobility, end quote. In a statement, Harvard admissions director William Fitzsimmons said the partnership reflected the university's commitment to, quote, bringing the most promising students to Harvard from all socioeconomic backgrounds, end quote. Again, I'm not aware of the fact that Harvard was having a hard time doing that before joining QuestBridge. Were they having really a hard time of doing that at Harvard? I think not. Leah Weisenberger, Dean of Admission and Vice President for Enrollment at Bates, said the new partnership isn't specifically aimed at increasing racial diversity, but it is part of the university's commitment to increasing, quote, all kinds of diversity, end quote. Quote, given the law, I don't want to misconstrue the QuestBridge partnership as an attempt to racially diversify our class. While we can't consider race any longer, we obviously are continuing to do everything in our power to feed our prospect application pools in access-oriented ways, end quote. So again, I have a lot of questions, and anyone reading this agnostically would as well. The fact of the matter is, colleges are relying on QuestBridge more than ever, and it's not a mistake that this has happened right after the affirmative action ruling at the Supreme Court. So again, the question deserves to be asked. Who is it at QuestBridge that is making the decisions about who becomes a finalist? And what criteria is being used to determine what transitions someone from an applicant with QuestBridge to a finalist at QuestBridge? This is all extremely, extremely shady. And the fact that Harvard and Penn and Yale and Princeton and Brown, all of them now, are relying so heavily, increasingly on QuestBridge, should raise a lot of questions in your mind. Now, from the perspective of a student or a family, you just have to look at the numbers. This is not a student-centered approach to applying to college. No way, shape, or form is QuestBridge looking out for you. QuestBridge is looking out for colleges who are their partners. And so going back over a decade, I have been very dubious about the value added of QuestBridge for an under-resourced student. It's a lot of actual and emotional labor to go through the process of applying via QuestBridge, only to find out that you're not a finalist, or you are a finalist, but then you're not matched. I would much rather you go about the process the way all of my students go about the process, which is Do the hard work necessary to determine what you value and which colleges align with your values. And then pursue an aggressive Common App approach to those colleges in your early senior year. And maybe even consider applying early decision and multiple places early action in order to best position yourself not only for college acceptance, but also for college acceptance at institutions that are likely to give you very robust need-based aid. QuestBridge does not, in my experience, give you any better shot at getting the aid you need or want. It does not give you any better shot of getting into colleges you seriously are interested in and have done your due diligence on. Who it helps is a small subset of students. I'm not quite sure even how to identify those students because QuestBridge, of course, will no longer really identify those students demographically in too many ways. But it helps a certain subset of students who feel as though, or who are in fact benefited from the writing opportunities on the QuestBridge applications because of what they can reveal about themselves in those writing opportunities that they feel for whatever reason they're unable to share on the Common App. But as you know, when I work with students on the Common App, I encourage them to use every little nook and cranny of the Common App to share compelling information about themselves. So I have no real concern that my students are going to have a hard time conveying valuable information about themselves on the Common App. So there's no real reason I would ever recommend QuestBridge to my students. I, again, am a firm believer in the fact that QuestBridge does not increase your chances of getting where you want to go for the vast majority of students. And therefore, why add the extra layer to the process of going through the QuestBridge process also slightly earlier than you would have to go through the actual ED or EA process at schools that are also members of both the Common App and QuestBridge? It's all very curious to me. Again, this is some sort of game is going on here. I mean, I'm going to use the word game because that seems somewhat polite, but I am very, very, very suspicious of what's going on here. And we all have the right to be suspicious because a third-party nonprofit is acting as an intermediary for these institutions that have amazing reach. Okay, Richmond and Bates may not have a huge reach, but Harvard? Harvard needs to rely on QuestBridge? This is not adding up. This is not adding up. Oh, by the way, did you see this letter from the United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights? Dear colleague, discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin is illegal and morally reprehensible. Accordingly, I write to clarify and reaffirm the non-discrimination obligations of schools and other entities that receive federal financial assistance from the United States Department of Education. In recent years, American educational institutions have discriminated against students on the basis of race, including white and Asian students, many of whom come from disadvantaged backgrounds and low-income families. These institutions embrace of pervasive and repugnant race-based preferences and other forms of racial discrimination have emanated throughout every facet of academia. For example, colleges, universities, and K-12 schools have routinely used race as a factor in admissions, financial aid, hiring, training, and other institutional programming. Although SFFA addressed admissions decisions, the Supreme Court's holding applies more broadly. At its core, the test is simple. If an educational institution treats a person of one race differently than it treats another person because of that person's race, the educational institution violates the law. Federal law thus prohibits covered entities from using race in decisions pertaining to admissions, hiring, promotion, compensation, financial aid, scholarships, prizes, administrative support, discipline, housing, graduation ceremonies, and all other aspects of student, academic, and campus life. Put simply, educational institutions may neither separate or segregate students based on race, nor distribute benefits or burdens based on race. Although some programs may appear neutral on their face, a closer look reveals that they are, in fact, motivated by racial considerations. and race-based decision-making, no matter the form, remains impermissible. For example, a school may not use students' personal essays, writing samples, participation in extracurriculars, or other cues as a means of determining or predicting a student's race and favoring or disfavoring such students. Relying on non-racial information as a proxy for race and making decisions based on that information violates the law. That is true whether the proxies are used to grant preferences on an individual basis or a systematic one. It would, for instance, be unlawful for an educational institution to eliminate standardized testing to achieve a desired racial balance or to increase racial diversity. The department will no longer tolerate the overt and covert racial discrimination that has become widespread in this nation's educational institutions. The law is clear. Treating students differently on the basis of race to achieve nebulous goals such as diversity, racial balancing, social justice, or equity is illegal under controlling Supreme Court precedent. All students are entitled to a school environment free from discrimination. The department is committed to ensuring those principles are a reality. This letter provides notice of the department's existing interpretation of federal law. Additional legal guidance will follow in due course. The department will vigorously enforce the law on equal terms. The department intends to take appropriate measures to assess compliance with the applicable statutes and regulations based on the understanding embodied in this letter beginning no later than 14 days from today's date, including anti-discrimination requirements that are a condition of receiving federal funding. All educational institutions are advised to 1. Ensure that their policies and actions comply with existing civil rights law. 2. Cease all efforts to circumvent prohibitions on the use of race by relying on proxies or other indirect means to accomplish such ends. And 3. Cease all reliance on third-party contractors, clearinghouses, or aggregators that are being used by institutions in an effort to circumvent prohibited uses of race. As we wrap things up, I want to remind you that you don't have to settle for the free videos alone. As you navigate the college admissions process, get the focused and personalized coaching and expertise you need to achieve your goals. My SMART sessions meet you where you are in order to take you where you want to go. Meanwhile, if you want proactive support throughout the college application process and want to collaborate with a dedicated expert to submit applications that are simply meticulous, reserve your preferred Simply Meticulous experience as soon as possible. Space is limited due to the time and attention to detail required to pull off these extraordinary coaching experiences. No matter your distinctive objectives, you can achieve them. If you'd like to work with me one-on-one, visit my website, which is collegemeister.com. And when you've finished your Common App and want to know if it's as strong as possible and whether or not in its current condition your chances of admission are impressive, inconclusive, or inadequate, you need my pre-read. Getting my pre-read now means having me review your entire application, just like an admissions officer or admissions committee will review it later, and receiving by email no later than the time you reserve a comprehensive report highlighting what's working and what's not on your full Common App and one Common App supplement. If you've yet to submit your Common App, my pre-read may motivate you to make adjustments to it before your deadline. If you've already submitted your Common App, my pre-read will prepare you for what I deem to be your likely admissions outcome at the institution in question. To purchase my pre-read now, go to mypreread.com. Again, that's mypreread.com. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. As mentioned previously, if you'd like to work with me one-on-one throughout the college admissions process, visit my website, which is collegemeister.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and most importantly, stay stress-free throughout the entire college admissions process.